Hello and welcome to FS Brew. FS Brew is the region's first podcast focusing on all things insurance and Insurtech in the UAE and the broader Middle East. I'm Renjit Philip. I work with a boutique consulting firm where I work on M&A, funding, and go-to-market support for startups and tech companies.
Hi, I'm Vidya. I'm the founder of Forward, a startup that works with insurance companies to build their go-to-market digital propositions. In today's episode, we have with us Ken Maw. He's the managing director at Futtaim Willis, a joint venture between Futtaim Services and Willis Group, which is part of Willis Towers Watson. It was an insightful conversation. We really hope you enjoy listening in to this episode. Ken, great to have you with us. Welcome to FS Brew.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you this morning.
Awesome. Same here. So tell us, you've been in the insurance industry for a pretty long time, actually, now. Tell us, how did you get into this industry? Why did you choose insurance as a career path?
I'll get straight into that because I think going back, I've been in the industry for over 4 decades, but it's not an industry that you tend to choose as a profession when you're leaving school or leaving university. Certainly 40 years ago, or just over 40 years ago, that was not the case. I left school with A-level in sciences, and I typically decided not to go to university, go straight into industry. And that I chose a path in science, actually. So I was actually working for a major food a food industry, particularly in the grains and animal feeds and what have you. And I was working in their laboratory in Cambridge. Had a great life there, actually. It was a fantastic place to live.
Right. So it's almost from the labs and academia to insurance. How did that particular...
I think it's all a question that you've got to take. Sometimes you've got to feel your way as to what you want to do. And so I managed to wangle a move to London and work with the same company, but getting involved more into the trading side. So this was looking at the grain buying from Canada and all other parts of the world. And so it was getting into the field of commerce. And then shortly after that, the company was merged with another company called Dalgety at the time. And I found myself made redundant. And here we are 3 or 4 years after leaving school, and you've been made redundant from a very major company. And so then I tried to get a commission in the army. So I tried for a place in Sandhurst. I had to go through, I got sponsored by the Queen's Regiment in Canterbury. And we had a very close friend who was a big financier in South Wales, one of the big family businesses there. He was in banking, he was in finance, he was in industries. And he basically offered me a job and said, Ken, what do you want to do? You can go into finance, you can go into accounting, you can go into insurance. So I just said, I'll try insurance. And then I ended up working for his insurance broker, which was a nice family business in Cardiff. So I moved to South Wales and started to learn the ropes in insurance broking. And that's how it all started.
Perfect. Yeah, and a lovely city to start working in, Cardiff. Now, you're the CEO of Futtaim Willis. For some of our listeners who are not from the insurance space, if they don't know what an international insurance broker does, could you please explain?
I'll turn the clock back a little bit because I'll go back to when I left Cardiff. I joined obviously HSBC, and that was really because I was looking to get abroad and work overseas. So they employed me to come to Dubai back in 1983, and in those days there were only 4 international insurance brokers, one of which was Futtaim Willis, and ran a very similar ship. This is the beauty of having joined Futtaim Willis at this point in my career, because I've almost gone back in time and I'm working for an organization which I'm very comfortable with, and which is a business of great similarity to the old HSBC operation, albeit much, much bigger. And the beauty of international insurance brokers is the fact that we get to support many global businesses, because obviously Willis Towers Watson is a global international insurance broker. And by virtue of that, it's working with many multinational firms. So we get obviously to look after those businesses, but at the same time, with the resources that they've got back in London on the complex risk placements, we get to get involved in many exciting large business and complex risks. And I think that's what has always been the excitement for me, is to really get into the nuts and bolts of supporting large businesses where you know that the smaller brokers don't have the resources to be able to really provide what's needed for these demanding clients.
And presumably the Futtaim group itself is a large sort of captive client with fairly.
I wouldn't necessarily go into that, because obviously Futtaim Group has a wonderful insurance underwriting business, which is the Orient. And there's a degree of differential between the two organizations. We are very much standalone. We work with Willis Towers Watson in London, and we are out in the market looking for large risks and going out to support government institutions, you name it.
Energy.
If it's large, we're interested.
Got it. Understood. Perfect.
Which is wonderful to note that. And I think there's so much that's happening in this region as well. So I think that international acumen of risk is very much welcome in this region.
Yeah, when it comes to insurance broking, again, I think one of the key things is trust. I've got one or two clients that I've been involved with, and I'm proud to say 40 years on, I'm still associated with some of those businesses. And that comes from trust. And people come to you because they know they want to work with you as an individual. I'm really delighted in the way that my career has transgressed over here, and the support that I've got from clients over the years who have maintained that level of trust with you.
Yeah. Wonderful. And just on that itself, how's that sort of that leadership style that you started off with, perhaps on your early days in HSBC insurance brokerage as a general manager, and then to now leading an international?
I think a lot of this is inbred into us. When you, and particularly childhood, is extremely important. How you are brought up as a child, how you are taught respect other people and to work with other people. And I think that's the first lesson. And when I joined HSBC, obviously I literally was only working there for probably 5 years before I got thrown into the GM's position. And that was purely because my then boss had a very serious horseback accident. He was a polo player. He had a stroke while he was playing polo. And basically that was the end of his career when it came to insurance broking and living here. It incapacitated him. And I was really thrown into the role at quite a young age.
In terms of, we did some research obviously on you, and lo and behold, there was a nice little blog, and we clicked a few pages there, and there are a few books there, and we said, wow, this is going to be interesting. So, and particularly drawn to one of your sort of recent posts quoting Thomas Jefferson. I think you said something like, or you quoted him saying, I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. I'm sure I'm butchering the quote, but
yeah,
can you tell us a little bit more about your interest?
When it comes to writing blogs, and I'm sure you're just the same, you want to be able to give a message which is really close to your heart and experience. And I've had a tough time with some banking institutions, and obviously I made reference to caveat emptor, which is one of the first things you learn in insurance, which is let the buyer beware. And when you buy a service, and it's going back to the trust issue, you expect whoever's giving you that service to give you their best. As a leader, you need to take responsibility for your mistakes and accept where you have made a mistake. And in the banking institutions, they hate admitting mistakes. You know, they hide around. I'm going back to it. This is in my blog, where they will have a lot of small print and they expect you to read this reams and reams of things that you declare. And 9 times out of 10, people just sign these things blindly because they have a trust in the institution that they're working with. And I was really seriously let down by this institution. It cost me dearly. And to this day, will always perhaps have slightly dim view on these sort of institutions and these suitcase salesmen that come here from overseas and run away back to their head office and hide behind their small print and legal teams. So as I say, it was a sharp lesson for me. And I thought, I need to write something about this. I can't name the institution for legal reasons, but at least I can bring it to the attention of my readers that be careful when you get into these sort of things and make sure that you read everything. And really, that was it.
Right. No,
so it was a message. There was a message from my heart.
Right. No, got it. I thought there was also something about the incredible amount of debt that some of our countries and banks.
This is, and I did a previous blog. I don't know if you read that one, which was about failed leadership, and that touched on the same thing, because obviously, if you go into politics and you look at how countries run their treasury and how they spend their money, it's very bad economics.
Yeah, and
we're lucky living in this country, where it's a wonderful situation here. If you look at, as I say, my typical thing is you look at America, for example, and you look at their debt mountain. It's actually impossible for that ever to be repaid. So you wonder, how come they just keep piling on the debt? Because the debt is actually, it's never going to be paid. So what does it actually mean? Is it debt? Is it not that other countries, America will be saying that you're in debt. You've got to put austerity measures in place to be able to get more money.
Yeah.
But they don't apply the same rules to themselves. So we're living in a society now which is really in a very dangerous situation, because there are so many countries which are on a precipice of insolvency, and where no one has a clue how to get out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they've been really riding on the back of that power of the reserve currency, but for how long remains to be seen. Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
This sounds quite passionate as well in the way you put all of these points across. Now, jumping back into your role as the CEO of Futtaim Willis, the organization has gone through a fair bit of changes from a leadership perspective in the recent past. Now you've coming in almost a quarter of 2024 gone. What are your priorities and what are your sort of strategic goals that you have brought in for the organization? What are your focus areas? It'll be great if you can tell us about it.
Yeah, it was interesting coming into this organization. As I say, I've had the fortunate experience to have been part of an organization which is very similar, and then I built up. I'm not sure if you're aware, when I left HSBC, I started an insurance broker from scratch. That was a fantastic learning curve, because I started as employee number 1. And it was fortunate because I was in partnership with a member of the Maktoum family. And then later on, we sold that business. We sold the business after a few years to Stithmar World, which was part of Dubai World. So I had a lot of opportunity to get involved in major risk all over the world and build that business. We eventually had branches in Bahrain, Qatar, and even in the Netherlands, where we bought a specialty marine broker that was heavily involved in the dredging and land reclamation sort of stuff, and with about 150 employees worldwide. And we eventually then sold that business to Jardine Lloyd Thompson. It was a fantastic experience for me. And there I can say I learned a tremendous amount, because obviously when you're starting as doing everything under the sun. I had to learn things about accounting and loading stuff on computers, which I'd never done before. And that experience really has been tremendous for learning how to manage the people and recruiting the right staff and people who want to come and work with you. I've been very fortunate that people like to work with me, and that makes life very easy. And I think one thing I would say that when it comes to managing a business, it's about empowering others to have freedom to develop within the industry. You don't want to micromanage businesses. You don't want to look at the clock and say, oh, he's come in 5 minutes late. You want people to have a good, healthy environment. I want people to go home on time. You've got to have an equal balance. And if people aren't doing that, people will get up, they'll be uptight. They won't be as productive because they won't be enjoying it. I want work to be an enjoyable environment.
Yeah, no, that's so important. Yeah.
So hopefully that's what I'm bringing to the organization. Obviously, since I've come in, I've seen a fantastic change, and it's a lovely office to work in. I'm enjoying it, and the people are wonderful. And I think with all those ingredients, there's no reason why we can't grow this into a substantial business.
And it presumably focus will remain complex risks, specialty businesses.
To say you can't overlook the SMEs and the retail, which is a huge part of this market.
Yeah.
Going some of the other questions that you've outlined go into Insurtech and looking at new innovative solutions. How are you going to be able to tackle looking after retail? Because you don't want to be running retail and with an army of staff. It's got to be more of a digital experience, and basically I want to be able to offer those products, but I don't want to be in a situation where we have to have an armada of staff to handle it. If we can handle it electronically using new tech solutions that make the purchasing process easy, we solve all the compliance requirements, then that's the way I want to go.
Perfect. Yeah. Talking about tech, one of the technology buzzwords that has caught the attention of the world is generative AI. Wondering if that is on the radar for you or your team, and if so.
I think it's definitely on the radar when it comes to Willis Towers Watson as a global organization. When it comes to us as Futtaim Willis here, we will obviously leverage off the tech expertise of our colleagues in London or elsewhere. Generative AI is going to speed up processes. It's going to make life a lot easier. But I suppose everyone's got to exercise a degree of caution because it's still relatively unknown as to how AI is going to change things for us moving forward. We need jobs in the future because everything will be controlled through computers and what have you, or a large degree of it will. We're going to have to change our lifestyle. We're going through a new industrial revolution. I'll call it industrial revolution because that's what they called it in the 19th century. But this, or 18th century, this is a new tech revolution. So we're going to see lifestyles changing. We're going to have to adapt ourselves to be able to fit in. And for me, obviously, I've come through a period of even pre-fax machine. You know, a lot of people probably don't know what a fax machine is because they went out of. We used to do messages through telex in the old days. There's been the degree of sophistication in technology moving over the last few decades has been enormous, and it's growing at a fast pace. So God knows what it's going to be like in a few years' time.
For sure. And I think to your point, I think AI also probably brings on some new set of risks that we have to be cognizant of and prepare for, right? We heard from leadership at Marsh, and they were very keenly focused on disinformation risk and so on and so forth that AI can potentially unleash, right?
So, we've seen it on the news with voiceovers and what have you. The criminal activities that could be built out using AI is frightening, to be honest. Yeah, absolutely. This will be a huge thing for the insurance industry moving forward because they're going to have to develop products that are going to adequately protect individuals from the risks of AI influenced. I could have probably written my 3 novels using AI, but I did it myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, you're right. A great tool for generating content, but how much of it is really useful content from what is human generated? So a lot number of issues that kind of it raises. And you're right. I think insurance companies need to prepare for this and cyber risks that come up as a result of
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
And also use it to the advantage, like what you alluded to, how some of the companies are using AI into really growing their business as well.
Yeah, I think
yeah.
we're seeing some interesting developments on the health side as well, because obviously AI is being used to look at records and things of millions of people and to be able to
Yes.
assess issues where they can bring better treatment and stuff to people. There are huge benefits from it. But I think it's, as I say, it's something that we've got to use very carefully.
Definitely. And just on that trends itself, what are you seeing from a consumer perspective on different lines of business? Are you seeing a lot of adoption of digital products? Are your clients asking for specific sort of embedded proposition, or is there more focus on ESG? And I know Willis Tower Watson has a specific arm around it itself. What is it that you are seeing from the position that you are?
As I say, when it comes to the broader digital sort of area, that for us is still something which is new for us, and we haven't really delved in it. We're still very much, as I say, focused on the larger corporate risks and where there's much more human interaction in terms of what we do, and it can't really be changed in that way. When it comes to the ESG, obviously the big word is climate and things. How is climate now? We're seeing huge changes, which is going to affect insurance buying across the world in terms of weather-related issues. And this is all, as I say, it's all we're paying the price of having been an abusive
species
animal, if we want to say an abusive species on this planet. We haven't looked after it, and we're paying the price for that. And as I say, we've got to take heed of it.
Yeah, and there's so much insurance can contribute towards this cost itself.
Yeah, but the question is, will insurance become exorbitantly expensive as a result of not being able to look after or cater for these enormous disasters which are now approaching? The storms are getting worse. It's interesting even seeing here the amount of rain that we've experienced this year. I've been living here for 40 years. I don't think I've seen as much rain in the last couple of months that I have in all the 40 years that I've been here.
For sure.
And that's a sign of climate change.
Yeah,
for sure. And we've seen how risk carriers in Florida are already withdrawing from certain areas.
Right.
So it's happening as we speak, right? Things have become uninsurable.
I tell you what, I've been looking at a Florida-based risk. America is an interesting situation because the premiums that are paid there are enormous. You look at, obviously, if you look at the statistics, the US dominates the whole world when it comes to cost of insurance, and the insurance industry is massive over there. Here, it's a fraction. Take health insurance, for example, and the way health insurance has increased ever since they introduced health insurance as the modus operandi because when I first came out here, we had government health cards and it was a much simpler situation. But now with private healthcare, it's becoming a huge burden on individuals and companies alike. They're having to budget large amounts to be able to provide healthcare for their staff. And I don't see any sort of abate in this. It's going to continue to rise unless we manage to tackle and find solutions for reducing expenditure.
Yeah, for sure. Interestingly, I was talking to an SME CEO and he was just complaining about the healthcare costs. So it's definitely felt everywhere. Taking a bit of a broader view on the regulatory environment, we hear of some of the changes that have happened recently in terms of the landscape for brokers. We also hear about open finance regulations and potentially which could have implications on insurers. Would love to know your thoughts on this and on the general regulatory landscape as well.
Unfortunately, I have a very thorough compliance team at Futtaim Willis. And what I've seen, because as I say, when in the turn of this century, in 2000, when I set up my previous broker, the regulatory environment was much, much easier. And to set up a broker and run it, in those days, I think we fell under the Ministry of Economy. It was simple. But over the last decade or so, the regulatory environment has become much, much stronger. And the fact is that insurance brokers need to invest quite heavily in making sure that they can comply properly with regulations that are perpetually being brought out, enhanced. And that comes at a massive investment. Yeah. Because you've got to have legal people, you've got to have full-time compliance people who are looking at these things and making sure that your business is being run according to the regulations that govern our industry. And that, I believe, is something that many small firms will find it more and more difficult to adopt, because it comes, as I say, at quite an expense to be able to have the luxury of being able to handle this important area correctly. I'm proud to say that Futtaim Willis has a fantastic compliance team. I think we treat this extremely seriously, and we invest heavily in it. So the message, I think, that should be out there for other firms to follow suit. It is an extremely important part of our life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right. And some of these small brokers, and we all say that there's too many brokers in the industry, they will definitely find it expensive to have a full-time compliance officer and some of the things.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, if you're looking at the insurance industry, and I've been saying this for decades now, is that there needs to be more consolidation in this market. Yeah. There's plenty of room for it, not just in the insurance broking side, where there should be, but also in the underwriting side too. I think the insurance companies need to strengthen their solvency and come together. And sometimes I believe that there's been too much emotional attachment to some of these companies, whether it's at executive level or whether it's at the shareholder level. There's always sometimes a reluctance to go down the route of looking at mergers and acquisitions. When it came to selling my business, we were at the peak of our development, and the business was literally only 13, 14 years old. And it's a business that, as I say, I built from one man to 150. And you thought, what do we do with that business? How do we grow it to the next phase? How do we take it to the next phase? And you can't be emotional when it comes to thinking that if you can merge the business or you can sell the business to someone who can bring really big value to the business, that's what you've got to bite the bullet at and say, yeah, I think we should do it. There's many brokers out here who have evolved over the years, and they have not thought about succession planning or what are they going to do in 10 years' time. Yeah. You can't think we got to do that tomorrow. You got to start planning for that years in advance, because actually a deal will take 3 or 4 years to consummate. So you've got to start early on. Yeah, and that's what we did when we sold the business to JLT. We'd started the discussions with them a couple of years in advance of the sale, and the sale actually took a number of years to conclude. In that it wasn't a straight on a date 100% goes. It was over a protracted period, which is sensible.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lesson that I'm also learning in my line of work, is that M&A really, the success is sometimes to the last person standing, right? If you're patient, that's when you win. If you're in a hurry to
Well,
close the
and
deal,
don't forget that when it comes to insurance broking in particular, we're a people business.
yeah,
So when you're investing in a business which is driven by people, you've got to make sure that the assets stay with the business.
absolutely.
So it can be quite a juggling match, but I did have some problems with our people in Holland, and to get them on board to the sale of the business, it was a question of some give and take to make sure the deal got across the line.
Yeah.
So speaking of people itself, how do you foster, and I think you alluded to it earlier as well, but how do you currently foster a culture of innovation within Futtaim Willis? Being part of Willis Tower Watson, does that sort of aid the whole innovation culture or hamper it? Or do you also support Insurtechs? And you mentioned how you do look forward to that, but in portions, how do you support Insurtechs in this whole process?
I think we look at Futtaim Willis as a business on its own, what we want to do. And one of the things that I did when I came into this business was to start formulating a 5-year strategic plan. Because interestingly enough, when I tried to dig out the plan of my predecessors, there was no such plan. You've got to start going back to scratch and saying, how are we going to grow this business? And as I said earlier, our focus obviously over the last 4 decades plus has been much more looking after the larger risks. But 90% of the business in the UAE is SME driven, and there's a massive, now you're looking at the population, there's a massive retail opportunity, and that's something that, as I say, we haven't really focused on. So we've now got to find the right solution to fit that, and it's really a question of you've got to go out and sniff and find out. I think we've found something that we like and that will work, because at the same time, I don't want to invest a huge amount of money into building out an IT solution when these things are actually more readily available and we can just customize a more off-the-shelf type product, which will be fit for purpose for us.
Yeah.
Nice. And is there a preview you can give us about it, or is it something that will come about?
No, it's a little bit work in progress. We haven't got down. We're still, I think you'll have to wait until Q3 probably for that.
Awesome. Okay, at least we know the timeline. Great. Awesome.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, you had a few decades in this space and leading large companies as well. So if you were asked about the advice you would give to aspiring CEOs in the broking space and insurance industry as a whole, what would you say?
As I alluded to earlier, I think having a good overall grounding and understanding the fundamentals of the business, which means really getting involved in everything right, learning the ropes from the beginning is a tremendous advantage. You can't just expect to land into a CEO role or anything like that. You've got to evolve in it. You've got to understand the business. You've got to have your heart in the business.
Yeah.
You've got to have the respect. And as I say, I don't think there's any particular formula. Everyone's got it within them because, we're all human. We can learn how to do this, but sometimes maybe we learn things by experiment. I sometimes think my short stint in looking at military stuff, you learn a lot. When I was at school, I did combined cadet force. So you learn things in terms of basic training and command tasks and things like that. So I think it's a broader experience that you've got to have, and you can extract that from many different things and apply it into the insurance industry or anywhere else where you're looking to try and grow a business. You've got to have the will, you've got to have the drive, and you've got to be able to take risk too.
Yeah.
And I think you've got to be accountable for mistakes.
Yeah.
Going back to, you've got to be able to accept that you as the leader will accept the mistakes of some of your team if they go the wrong way. We made the mistake. You don't want to pin that down on a particular individual, because the individual working for you, and it will just be very demotivating to come crashing down on someone that's made a mistake. We all make mistakes,
Yeah.
But we accept that you as the leader of the company will take the fall if need be. But I always say you lead by the charge. The leader should be up there in front of his team and moving forward. You're the first out of the trench, as they say.
Yeah. Yeah.
True. Awesome. So we've almost come to the end of the long form of the interview, and we have one whimsical question for you. So if you had a billboard on Sheikh Zayed's Road for putting out an inspirational or a motivational message, what would that be?
Well, forget business. I would say, wake up world, wake up earth. Something to say that we as a species, as I say, we need to get off our backsides and do something instead of just sitting and watching what's going around. There are so many awful things happening in this world that we just are watching and not doing anything. The time has come for people to think about how can we make our children's lives better? Because at the moment, we're doing nothing to really, as I say, if you look at leaders of the past, we had some fantastic leaders in the past who were able to do things and get things done. Today, we've become wound up with legal and all sorts of other things which tie us up and strangle the ability to get things done. People will always find an excuse to say, oh, you can't do that. Sometimes we've got to do it because if we don't do it, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think definitely that the earth needs to wake up.
Awesome.
Very good.
That
I think
sounds powerful.
on that inspirational note, we can get into what we call the rapid fire questions if you're ready. We prefer answers in 60 seconds or less, and we will throw a few at you, starting with me and then Vidya to follow. Is that okay, Ken?
All right. Okay. Yeah. I'll try and do that. Yeah.
All right. So here goes. So what would you say is the biggest lesson you learned in your career?
Biggest lesson was probably starting from scratch, building a business from scratch. You can't do anything. That was everything, really, because it taught me everything.
You have to do a number of things when you do that, right?
Yeah, you have to take the seat of your pants, basically.
How would you, if you had one word to describe your leadership style, how would you do?
I would say fairness.
Okay, that's a good one. Which city would you say is your favorite city for travel?
For travel, I would say Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. We have a small villa there, and I find it an extremely relaxing place to go to, and the sea is beautiful.
This is near the Red Sea, right?
Yeah, it's on the Red Sea coast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Any book, blog, podcast, YouTube, documentary, etc., that you recommend the most?
My own.
And one more?
God. I don't really have any others.
No. Okay. All right. Perfect.
No.
We should put the.
You got to go
link
to my got to go to my blogs and my books.
We should put the link to your blogs and book on our show notes. Who would you say is the most? Oh, sorry, there's a different one. Which would you say is the most exciting tech innovation of the last few years in insurance?
In insurance, I thought the question was going to be broader than that, but I would have said, if I was to say what is the most exciting tech innovation, I would say VR.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, sure. You've seen those snazzy gadgets that Apple is releasing.
It's amazing stuff. Amazing. And I can see that becoming more and more sophisticated, and it's going to immerse us into something really unusual moving forward. I think we're seeing the science fiction movies coming to life.
Yeah, for sure. Very good. Vidya, now yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Who would you say is your sort of role model or most inspiring entrepreneur or business leader?
Most inspiring business leader? I suppose I would go for the likes of Warren Buffett or someone like that. He's been a very steady rock over the last 50 years or so. And he's a modest individual too. You look at so many of these business leaders today, and it's become extravagance. And I was absolutely appalled, for example, when you hear what the likes of Elon Musk wants as a remuneration package. Is someone worth all that money? I think it's disgraceful, to be honest.
Why am I glad you didn't say that he is your inspiring entrepreneur?
That's true. So another controversial one, what is your preferred way of working from home or working from office?
I prefer to work in the office. I think I like coming to the office. I think you perform better. At home, you're always going to get distraction. But
True.
obviously, if I can understand, for example, in the UK and elsewhere, where you've got huge commute issues, we look at time management. The amount of time lost in commutes can be enormous. That's why I think sometimes there can be a good degree between work from home, where you've got people who've got massive commuting times. It would be, even the distractions that you might get at home would be less than the time lost in the commute.
Yeah,
true, absolutely. So what is that one top priority for you at Futtaim Willis for 2024?
More of the same, basically. I think, as I say, what we've wanted to do is to instill a much healthier working environment. I want to have people enjoying what they're doing, and the hunt for new business is always there. And for me personally, obviously, I want to look at how we can work on that strategic plan, looking at the future, looking at what's going to happen in the next 5 years.
Nice, wonderful. What would you say is the biggest risk you have ever taken?
The biggest risk I've ever taken, I would say, that is, again, going back to the day where I thought I'm going to start my new business. That's a huge risk that you're taking, because you don't know what's going to happen. You're investing in a business. You are having to do everything yourself. And when I did my budget for the insurance brokerage that I started back in 2000, you make your projections, you make assumptions on which clients you think you might be able to attract. And 9 times out of 10, that never happens. And you've got to redraft the whole thing. New opportunities arise. And that's what I learned. Sometimes we think, oh, it's all about our old clients. We want them to come over to us. But if you're doing it as a one-man show, it's very difficult to attract the big clients, because they're taking a risk going to you where you've got a small business. And I learned that the hard way, because I thought one of my major clients would come over to me, and they didn't. They stayed where they were because they were happy with the status quo. So then you've got to go out and look for new business opportunities. And I was very lucky. I came across some fantastic new clients that I built relationships with, and was the foundation for a wonderful business.
That's a good learning for both of us as as we are. On the
don't cling to the past. Look to the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thank you.
And that's a great way to bring the podcast to a close. We've had a great time having you here, Ken.
Thanks very much. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Until next time.
And don't forget to read my books.
Absolutely. Yes, that's one takeaway for our audience.
They're available on Amazon.
Absolutely. We'll make sure.
Thanks very much.